hey everyone, thanks for joining this episode of the Union Podcast. We took a little bit of a break. Glad we're back. Hey Chris, hey John, how are y'all?
Doing good. Ready for an exciting conversation.
Well, of course it's exciting because we're talking about enterprise brains, right? So the enterprise brain I have seen it described several ways. But people always they always mean the same thing. They're like, hey, I want this like all-knowing place where I can go query all types of information, at any given moment, right? So I've heard it called digital brain. We've used cognitive enterprise, right, in terms of an enterprise understanding, and but mostly I think the default is enterprise brain. So John, I want to talk with you about what this really means for we'll say enterprises 500,000, 2,000, 10,000 employees, right? Not small companies, but there's a lot of tribal knowledge that gets lost. There's all types of information, but there lack insight, right? And I've seen a lot of people talk about this. What does it mean to you? And when you talk to customers, how do they describe this?
Yeah, well, and it does matter to companies of all sizes. The tribal knowledge problem is, as soon as there's two people in the company, someone knows something the other doesn't, and that becomes a bigger and bigger rift. The key for us is that the brain is far more than understanding, but understanding is the absolute prerequisite, because we need understanding that allows us to reason, that allows us to act. And if we don't have that solid basis of understanding, we have no ability to reason on behalf of the company that we're actually working for. So if your strategy around AI is to go agentic and it doesn't have a basis in understanding, how on earth is that agent going to work on behalf if it doesn't even know the you it's acting on behalf of? So we've got to start with understanding. And it can't be siloed understanding, because in fact, that's what causes our organizational challenges now. We need a single view of a customer to understand how agentic should react to a customer issue, as just a really obvious example. How does that lead to then action? Is that we're in this for outcomes. If we are only building knowledge bases and we're only getting Gen AI models to do agentic tool execution and not only at a tactical level, we're not going to ROI that stuff. In fact, as we record this, there's countless organizations that I'm hearing are saying they're cutting their Gen AI budgets down because they're finding there's a ton of use, like tokens are flying through the internet, but how much of it is actually returning actual ROI? They can't quantify the productivity. They can certainly see the bill. So they're struggling right now with this, and that's the real ultimate key here: understanding that enables us to reason, that enables us to act, and those actions become the real return on investment. And I don't mean actions by people, because if that's all we've actually empowered, we're already overwhelmed people. We're already stuffed full of information. The goal is for AI to have that understanding, reasoning, and ability to act. That's when we really get that power, and that's when the business transforms.
Yeah. So, John, I was thinking about when one of our development managers goes on holiday, it's great they can come back and all the meetings he would have joined are recorded and there's transcripts. But who has time to go into each one and look at the transcript and ask a question about an action item? Like, they need to be able to say, in my absence, are there any action items I need to cover that wasn't covered by someone else in a different meeting? So because when we release software, there's coordination of DevOps, there's quality assurance, there's the development, and product management. We all have to like coincide on a specific release. So getting that visibility across even parts of one department is a challenge. People think, well, I got action items in the meeting, I'm getting ROI. It's like, really? It's just a list of action items enough without the understanding of the bigger process?
Right. And look, we are actually in the so-called note-taking business with our meeting agent, but frankly, those meeting summaries are spam. Forgive me, but they're spam. How many times are you dying to see the meeting summary from the meeting you've just been in, and you're so happy that it's flooding your inbox with these? You don't want that stuff. If I wanted I attended the meeting so that I could hear it. Now, the problem is that 3 months from now, I need that maybe kernel of info that I didn't even recognize was important, woven together with others to solve a problem at that moment. And hopefully not for me to solve, but for an AI agent on my behalf, because that's where the power comes from. So flooding my inbox with, hey, by the way, aren't you so happy that your buddy colleague has this note taker that's about to send you yet another email? No, I'm
Yeah.
not. If the goal here was to puff us up with information, really, did we really need another system for doing that?
Well,
What we
the
really need to be doing is getting information together.
the summary, the risk may be greater than the reward, right? Because there's class action lawsuits against some of the note takers where the summary was sent to the client or the prospect, or and they didn't really agree to have their voice recorded, right,
Mm.
and their likeness or whatever. And so if you say something, and there's stories on the internet, right, where people talked afterwards. They talked bad about a prospect or a customer or
Right.
or what have you, and that summary was sent out, and it totally burned that deal. So
Yep. Think
um,
about the hot mic moments we've seen in politics. Now you get to participate in them.
yeah. So you have to be really, really careful. Um, and then you know, architecturally, Chris, the note takers, when you sign up for these things, they're all individual, right? I saw
Right.
this the other day. I was on a vendor call, and there were 3 different bots in the call, right? I think there was like 4 people in the call, and everybody had their own bot because they all signed up
Right.
individually for something. Like architecturally, that's not going to work, right? Because they're still, like John was saying, they're still siloed.
Right. They're siloed. So it's great. You have it. You have what you wanted for your meeting summary, and you send it out to other people. And someone else sent you their meeting summary, another meeting summary. So John said you could possibly get 3 different summaries of the same meeting. And the challenge is, like, just because you're in a meeting, the other people on your team, the other people in your department at the enterprise level need visibility into that. Right. So it's like, it's great that this bot gave me a personal summary, but that doesn't mean my manager has visibility. So when I'm on vacation, he knows, what happened in that meeting, because no one can join all meetings. And you don't need to know information from all meetings, but you need access to information at, say, a department level to the enterprise level, right? So if someone said, I wasn't around when we had the all hands call about company benefits. Well, you should be able to just ask the enterprise brain about that, because that's something that's scoped to all employees. If it's something is in the HR department where they're making policy changes, that's something that's scoped to that department. In finance, they have things that are scoped to theirs. And then even within, say, consulting, say this project for customer 1 versus a project for customer 2 has individual scope. So we can't think about, I've got individual silos. There are layers, just like we have in security and LDAP and things we see in Azure. There's project level information we all need to share, because the support agent certainly needs to understand what's happening at a project level if they get a support call. Overall, the management and customer success needs to know that, and development needs to have visibility into that. And then it goes wider and wider. So we can't have silos, because it doesn't help each other with information for 1,000 meetings we didn't join.
Yeah, there was another podcast, In Good Company podcast. Reid Hoffman was talking about this technology already exists, and everyone is already recording meetings, but they're not getting insight from it because it's all disconnected, and there's and you can run action items. So like John was saying, we need to act upon it. But John, we talked about the note takers, and the obvious starting point is recording meetings. But what other things can be included in an enterprise brain? Because there's a lot more data that's disconnected in other CRM systems, ERP systems. What else can be included?
Yeah, well, so it certainly isn't an individually scoped meeting bot, right? That's no brain. That is correctly called a note taker. That if you ask me, I can send you a link to a particular meeting. That's not going to cut it, right? That's not enterprise understanding. That's not what we're talking about. What is the building of that understanding across all, of course, not your one-on-one meetings, by the way, not your private meetings, all of the good security measures that need to be put in place for any other type of data stewardship. When you have that, and that is now covered in these types of data captures, like in a meeting, then you integrate that with emails that, again, are appropriately scoped, Teams chats or Slack, your existing document repositories, and systems themselves. We need to be able to query those systems with the same type of understanding. So when you mentioned the Reid Hoffman podcast and that everybody's recording these things and no one's getting insights, I beg to differ. You've seen ourselves. I've internally shown you. We, just as one quick example, we are constantly getting, I say constantly, at least 2 or 3 times a month, getting asked by a customer for us to build a certain product and bring it to market related to LLM access. And I keep sending them to others who are supposedly in that space, only for them to say, no, that stuff isn't any good. I really want you guys to do this. I think, why aren't you doing it? You should do this. So I go into our own reporting agent and I postulate, what would the investment thesis in building out this product be? Now, what is that? Is that a prompt to a random Gen AI model that has no understanding and is about to apply Reddit reasoning to this investment decision for us? It is the exact opposite. It's thousands of meetings, our entire roadmap and documentation, access to our own change management system, existing sales contracts, giving us very clear insight. Was able to make predictions about how much of the product is actually already existing given our architecture. How do we currently message, and how would it complement or compete with what we currently do to bring this to market? Do those competitors have a leg up on us, or do we have one on them, given the buying, of course, based on web search, integrated web search, and agentic analysis? Bring in outside sources, of course, right? For competitive intel, from market data. But so much of that investment thesis is based on who we are and what we do and what our existing pipeline looks like, and what incredible insight. And that's just one example. When you think about what really happens when you empower AI to drive these types of analysis, I end up with an investment thesis of 80 pages of really hardcore content, heavily cited, with our own internal references and external web references. And I think this is the kind of stuff a startup could never have imagined. I could never have imagined writing an investment thesis like this. My first business plan was like 30 pages. And this is an 80-page investment thesis on a particular product.
That someone mentions, would be cool, right?
Right.
But I mean, so obviously, we're operating this enterprise brain internally, right? But not everybody has that capability yet, right? So what's the path? So if someone, if there's a CTO somewhere that said, hey, I want to run the same query, right? Like, should I build this feature? Should I deprecate this, or should I accelerate this, or based on maybe the roadmap, based on the sales forecast? What would be the path to get there?
The hard thing is the tribal knowledge, right? Each department has tribal knowledge. Like support knows people use certain features. Salespeople know what people are interested in. And then product knows what's inside the product itself and what the level of effort. So if you don't have, say, starting with your because all your tribal knowledge comes out of meetings, decisions, and discussions inside of meetings. So starting with your meetings itself means when the architects talk about a feature and how the architecture works together to support different functionality. And then how when support talks about these are things that customers are asking about, and it's also, we have ours like plugged into our Jira system. So we see our tickets that come in. We have it plugged into our enterprise data itself. So we have more than just the meetings, but starting with meetings is how you capture intellectual property and tribal knowledge. But then you need to connect your systems of record, like, well, how many tickets were opened on a specific feature? Do people use it? or were people asking for adjacent features to something. That's in the ticketing systems. That could be in your Salesforce. That could be in your Jira, things like that. So it's starting with getting all your tribal knowledge in meetings, and then looking at your enterprise sources, those systems of record, and connecting to those in real time, because those things always change. Like every day, there's something that's opened and closed in those systems of record. So it can't be just, hey, I've recorded a bunch of meetings, I put it on a hard drive. It has to be that plus real-time connections into the changing systems themselves. Every time a new deal comes into HubSpot, there's a new opportunity. What's that opportunity? You have to connect across those systems of record to get really good insights.
And then, John, like connecting all this, what are the privacy ramifications if all these terms and conditions and privacy notices across all these different products? How do you alleviate those fears to someone trying to do this?
Well, the best way is, of course, for whoever you're partnered with doing this type of work of collecting information that you intend to use, is you've got to be really transparent about it, and you've got to be clear, and you've got to allow the opt out. It's only going to get worse for privacy advocates. And by the way, I'm both a privacy advocate, of course, and I'm a cybersecurity guy by trade. And both of these vectors have there's enormous consequences associated with this. I would say, just to kind of level set, there's always been meetings recorded. There's always been a little tape. When Sony made the first mini tape recorder,
Dictaphone. It was called a dictaphone.
Since the 70s, people have been recording people, right?
Yeah.
So we and of course laws allow for and don't allow in certain circumstances. So we've got to follow the rules. And the best way to follow those rules, if you're an enterprise, if you're thinking organizationally, not personally, is, as Chris mentioned a minute ago, allow the authorization and access policies that you already put on existing corporate data to also apply to the meeting data. It's that simple. And then have conscious policies about what do we do with customer data, which of course we already do. We have a whole system that we get third-party audited for on what do we do with our customers' data, right? So all of this makes for a really clean system if it's thoughtfully enterprise oriented and applied as if it's enterprise data. If you do it in the opposite order, where I send links around to people and that's how they get access to stuff, then an individual can absolutely offend some company's policy and not even know they did. So we've got to have a different attitude and point of view about it. We're filling Teams chats. We're filling Slack channels. We're sending emails all the time. We've been doing that for 30 something years. It's already the case. This is not new. It's just that much easier. So making good use of it is, I think, more the focus, because we already know what to do. We just have to do it with the data privacy, data regulation type stuff.
And then I'm kind of curious how long it would take for somebody else to do this, right? Because we are on an accelerated time frame, right? Because we built it, so we installed it and it worked. But for someone that has tried to gain insight from different tools, and they already record meetings with somebody else, and is this, if they want to get to that point where they have this understanding, like what kind of time frame is this?
Yeah. So look, we have customers who've done this, and it was one of the most proud kind of daddy moments when I heard the CEO of one of our customers say, Krista is our brain. There isn't a single thing that happens in this organization that is not through basically Claude and Krista run their business, is his assertion. And he asserts that as everything our people do is either through Claude into Krista, or Krista triggering either people or Claude or directly against systems. There's nothing that happens in the business that is outside the purview of Krista. And that is the basis of everything with how we operate going forward. And that is I think, a lighthouse account for how we see the world. And we think that that needs to be the operating model for every business. And for a larger enterprise, you'll have to start this at a departmental level, but you will need to have some way to stitch all of that siloed and cement block fencing you put around every one of those departments in order to get there. We think the customer journey is the right way to do that for most businesses. So follow the path your customer takes to interact with you. Start anywhere along that path, but do that as the way for you to establish that theme through the organization that brings this all together. Because once you do, every single part of the business is healthier, runs faster, is smarter, etc.
Yeah, the customer path. I mean, I'm biased, right, to that, but because if you think about the customer journey, I mean, you're following the dollars, right? So they're either coming in as sales or support type of organization where you're trying to reduce churn and anything like that. Most of the customer journey systems are put together, and they have procedures, right? So there's a lot of turnover in those organizations. So at least the procedure is written down, because we've talked to other departments, finance, governance and compliance. Someone knows the procedure, but it's not updated all the time. So,
So-
with the customer you were talking about, did they follow the customer journey or did they start somewhere else?
So ironically, they did not. Think of a pharmaceutical, right? Pharmaceutical manufacturer maybe isn't the customer journey to get the path through the organization, because that is so heavily research and R&D biased to that's where their brain needs to mostly be centered, right? So it's not a for everybody comment. It's essentially a way to describe that you need that path through your organization to stitch together the things that you guys tore apart. Because we literally did. We deployed a whole bunch of siloed SaaS stuff where we now have, even if it's in the same cloud provider, we have isolated ourselves away all of the data sources. And we've even provided logins to only some of the systems to each of the employees. And there's even teams at the largest of companies that literally steward, does that person really need access to that data and that information or in that system? And for what period of time? All of that is a correct motion, by the way. I'm not disagreeing with it, but that absolutely flies in the face of, now I need enterprise understanding so that my business runs at machine speed and AI can make intelligent decisions instead of only half informed, and hopefully it's going to be smart enough to do what we would do. That's not enough. That's not the proposition we're looking for. So whatever stitches together your key data sources and your key business processes is that right one. I think for most, it's going to end up a customer journey, but it'll be different.
Yeah, the pharmaceutical, that's a good example, right? Because that's I'm not familiar with the FDA approval process, but it's years, right? So that would be following the dollars, as I said earlier. But Chris, what you have any closing thoughts on someone that wants to try this? Where should they look? How long should they think about this? Taking.
So actually implementing, say, our conversation agent is just a couple days, right? The trick is you need to get your employees ready to change what they want to do, get them all on a same consistent enterprise grade. We call conversation agent. It's a note taker. And then you would be surprised after 1 week and then after 2 weeks, how the knowledge is starting to come into a central repository. And the trick is how you can now draw lines across multiple meetings. So you don't need, months of data to actually have this inference. It's literally, people say, like, what was the decision we made last week? Or 2 weeks ago, we talked about this. I don't remember what we did. It is literally within 2 weeks, you've now got more knowledge at your fingertips than you did before. And in our case, we can then in a meeting go ask, like, when we discuss this, what were our action plans? Were these implemented somewhere else? And like, what was the decision and why did we make the decision? My question's always, why did we decide to do this? It's like there was a architectural reason we did something, but no one quite remembers why we did it. And so it's literally a couple weeks of meetings and your intellectual property becomes a knowledge base.
Yeah, that's a good example. John, any closing thoughts before we go?
Well, I'll give you another example, or I'll give you a more concrete example of a customer who's, I think, really focused on the right set of things, right? It's about effectively uplifting their people's productivity, increasing their ability to manage without it being a micromanaging type of environment. So they're collecting all of the action items that kind of come out of all of those meetings, generating weekly summaries to those individuals to see what they have and have not yet completed, set them up appropriately for next week's tasks, and before important meetings, getting pre-reads on what they need to remember and what they should have already accomplished to make sure they can be effective in the meeting that's coming up. And as an executive, the thoughts that went into that are, I want my people to be better aligned to the goals and the tasks that we have and they've signed up for. I want them more effective when we do have meetings, because I'm tired of meetings, but we have to have them. So I want to make sure that we get empowered to actually accomplish things when we do have meetings. And then I need to have that understanding so that when, say, weeks to months from now, I need to understand how something ended up the way it did. I've got access to it. I know. And all of this was a people-oriented productivity. The building of that level of understanding with other systems included, right? It's not just about transcripts. Creates the understanding that begets reasoning, that begets outcomes that are machine speed. And that's what we're really looking for. Because again, I'm suspicious that there's a massive ROI to have a whole bunch of note takers throwing emails in everybody's inboxes. I just don't see how that ROIs. I can definitely see the integration of that type of content woven into the systems data, into the other unstructured data with an AI fabric on top of it. Oh yeah, I can totally buy into the opportunity to make money there. But I don't know about a whole bunch of meetings and a whole bunch of extra websites that now I can go and I can share links out to other people ad hoc. I just don't see how that's going to get us anywhere. But I definitely see how enterprise understanding does.
Yeah. All right. Well, super. Thank you guys for joining me on this episode. We're going to touch a lot about enterprise brain. This is obviously a recurring theme that's going to be hot with us. So until next time.